With due respect to our most revered leader, His Holiness the Dalai Lama, Honorable Chief Justice Commissioner, Speaker and Deputy Speaker of the Parliament, colleagues of the Kashas, and chairmen of different commissions, members of the Parliament, and friends from the media and the public, and especially to the participants from all over the world. On behalf of the Central Tibet Administration, I would like to express our heartfelt gratitude for coming all the way to be with us today here in Dharamsala. Because this Tibet Support Group meeting is extremely important during this tragic phase of Tibet's history. Given the unfolding crisis inside Tibet, they all are looking at us as to what we might do for Tibet and Tibetan people. In that sense, this TSG meeting is historic and extremely significant. In the sense, we are sending a clear message to Beijing that friends of Tibet are here to show their support, solidarity, and also plan events to make sure that the issue of Tibet will remain alive, not just alive, will be stronger and stronger till the day comes. Tibetans will regain their freedom, and His Holiness the Dalai Lama will return to Tibet. Also, we send a message through this meeting to Tibetans inside Tibet. They are the ones who are suffering. They are the ones on a daily basis endure imprisonment, torture, denial of any basic human rights. But they are doing all they can and more by giving up their lives, with the hope and belief that exiled Tibetans and their friends will stand up with them. Even if they get tortured, even if they die, their lives will not go in vain because their friends outside will stand up for them. Their friends outside will make known their aspirations. All over the world, and the international community will rally around the cause. And even though they will leave this world, but their children and the children will see the day of freedom in Tibet and His Holiness the Dalai Lama to his rightful place. In that sense, this special meeting gives them hope. And hope is one thing that keeps human life, keeps the movement alive. Because if you look at the history or the current situation inside Tibet, it might look dark and gloomy, but it's the hope. They all are clinging on, and with this conference, we are sending a clear message to them. And also to the international community, because you have come from different countries, that the message is, we want the international community to focus on the issue of Tibet, and now. Yes, democracy has swept the Eastern European countries. Yes, freedom is sweeping Arab countries. Yes, Aung San Suu Kyi is released and walking around freely. It's time for Tibet. It's time for His Holiness the Dalai Lama also to return to Tibet. So your message to the international community is also not just that they have to speak out and show sympathy and to some extent support. But the message is, we need the international community now. That is the message. In that sense, even though the political leadership and the responsibility is handed over to the new generation, but you all are saying, even though the leadership and the responsibilities might have changed, but we are the friends of Tibet. We will continue with this movement. We will march with the new leadership. We will give the same support and more to make sure that Tibetans inside Tibet deserve basic freedom and rights that you all enjoy in your own independent countries. I'm sad to inform you that 2 more Tibetans have self-immolated, including a woman. Now it's 74 Tibetans. We had one in 2009, no self-immolation in 2010, but from March 16 on, in 2011, we had less than 2 dozen. The majority of self-immolation have taken place this year. In October alone, there were 10 self-immolation, and 7 in 7 days. In November, we're just midway through, 12 self-immolations, and 5 in 5 days. That speaks of the gravity of situation inside Tibet and the urgency of the crisis of Tibet. I know self-immolation has been a difficult issue for all of us, not just for our friends, but also for Tibetans. In Kasha, we debated a lot, and finally, we came out with our stand. Because when I first went to the US and European countries, a lot of probing questions from the other side, very influential people. We know self-immolation is happening inside Tibet. What is your stand? You have to make it clear. Morally, philosophically, politically. And this is our stand. As a human being, you don't want to see anyone die like that. And it's a natural reaction for a human being to say, please, don't die like that. That's why Central Tibetan administration have made repeated appeals to Tibetans inside Tibet not to resort to drastic actions, including self-immolations. But it persists. Even yesterday. Now what do you do? Is the next question. And as a Buddhist or people of any faith, when someone dies, what do? You pray for the dead. That's why Tibetan administration has organized many, many prayers for those who have died. And we will have one on Sunday where you all are invited to participate as well. Because that's what you do as a person of faith or no faith. When someone passes away, you pay respect. We have done that. Now, as a Tibetan, what do? As a Tibetan, you show solidarity because they are dying for Tibet and Tibetan people. And as a Tibetan, you support their aspirations. The aspirations being the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Tibet and freedom for Tibetan people. To support Tibetans inside Tibet is our sacred duty. They are the ones who are suffering. They are the ones who will tell us what to do. Once they tell us, we have no option but to support them, support their aspirations. This I appeal to our friends as well. Yes, we have issues. Yes, there are debates. Yes, it's a complicated issue. But we should not focus simply on the action. We have to focus on the causes, why it's happening. So we should blame where blame should be. Beijing's hardline policies. Why Tibetans and Tibetans are giving up their lives. Occupation of Tibet, political repression, economic marginalization, environmental destruction, cultural assimilation, denial of religious freedom, and so on. These are the causes. And Tibetans and our friends are expected to rise and say why Tibetans are dying, why Tibetans are self-immolating. It's a complex issue, but the causes we know. And point out to the causes and say these are the causes that forces Tibetans to self-immolate. And we have no choice but to support the aspirations of Tibetan people. So yes, we should debate, we can debate on the action, but absolutely we must point out and stand up and say these are the causes, and wholeheartedly stand up and say we support the aspirations of the Tibetan people. If we as Tibetans and friends don't stand up for aspirations of Tibetan people, then I think we are not fulfilling our responsibilities. Now, the Chinese government blame us. They say it's a terrorist act. Someone outside China is instigating it. Absolutely baseless. 74 self-immolators. Not even a single one of them has harmed even a single Chinese person, or a Chinese restaurant, or a Chinese hotel, or a Chinese house. How can it be a terrorist act? Yes, Tibetans are harming themselves. But even at that painful phase, when one is burning, they are not looking at Chinese, or they are not running towards Chinese, but they're dying a painful death by themselves. Now if the Chinese government insists, we have already issued a statement. The Chinese government and the international community can come to Dharamsala, check our files, see for themselves if there's any connection. There is no connection, there is no instigation. The blame and the solution lies solely with the Chinese government. Because these people who are dying are of what we call socialist paradise generation. When the Red Army first moved to Tibet, they promised socialist paradise for Tibetans. But there is no socialism or paradise. Rather, there is occupation and repression. Now 74 Tibetans, and how many more have to die before the world speaks out, before the Chinese government realize that they ought to address this issue. So that is why it's all the more important that after this meeting, wherever we go, we come out without any hesitation to support the aspirations of the Tibetan people. As I said, when I first went to DC and European countries, questions were asked. After we made our stand very clear and wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post, making it very clear where we stand and explaining the causes of the self-immolation and aspiration self-immolation, the leaders around the world have started speaking out more forcefully. In that sense, we welcome the UN Human Rights High Commissioner's Navi Pillai's statement on the issue of Tibet, and the US Ambassador Gary Locke's visit to Tibet and his statement, and statements from around the world, making it clear that repression is the reason why there are self-immolations. And there is a problem in Tibet which ought to be addressed. So that when the world leaders, including the United Nations, is speaking out on Tibet, it's all the more important we, the Tibetans and our friends, speak out more loudly, rally more forcefully, so that these Tibetans will realize their aspirations. Now, we know the 18th Party Congress just concluded, and it will have direct ramification on the issue of Tibet. But it's too soon to conclude as to which direction the new leadership will go. Generally, of the 7 leaders, reportedly 5 are from the Princeling faction, Xi Jinping, Jiang Zemin, and 2 are from Hu Jintao side. But then if you look at the age, most of them are in 64, 65, in the mid-60s. So they are more conservative-leaning group. So how much to expect from them is to be seen. So it's pretty clear among the top 7, we don't have even a single Tibetan, not at all, never has been, not even a single quote-unquote minority. Now if you look at the top 25 as well, that's the Politburo of the Chinese leadership, not even a single quote-unquote minority. There used to be a Hui minority among the top 25 in the 17th Party Congress, but not this time. And then if you go further down in the Central Committee of 225 or so people, there are 39 members from minorities, but only 10 permanent members. 29 are alternate members, means 10 have a say in the Central Committee. But then, compared to the 17th Party Congress, the minorities' representation in the Central Committee has decreased. It used to be 16 permanent members, now it's reduced to 10. So if you go by percentage, from 7.6% representation, it has been reduced to 4.87%. So if you go by the population, 1.3 billion Chinese, 1.3 billion in China, 100 or so minorities, of which there should be around 8% representation, even at the Central Committee level. Now it's been reduced to less than 5. So in that sense, the representation at the top, at the Central Committee level, has been reduced. In that sense, the say is marginalized. But then now whether this new leadership will have new perspective on the issue of Tibet, will review the policies of Tibet, it's too soon to say. But in months to come, we might get some hints, and then we might know what will happen, and accordingly we have to formulate our own thinking. But generally, on the issue of Tibet, wherever we go, we make this argument, and it's for your consideration to all our friends. What we say is that Tibet is not a constitutional challenge for China, nor an institutional challenge for China, or nor an issue of political will. Because when you talk to Chinese, they often say it's so complicated, and they give you so many reasons. And why we say it's not an institutional, constitutional, or political will. Number one, when the Chinese government wants to solve an issue, they always find a way. Constitutionally, as far as Hong Kong is concerned, or Macau is concerned, the one country, two system, Article 31 of the Constitution of China was included to address special administrative regions like Hong Kong and Macau. In the Chinese constitution, there is no concept called one country, two system. But it's the Article 31 which says that a special administrative region can be established. Based on that article, one country, two system for Hong Kong was given, one country, two system for Macau was given. Now, when you make this argument, they say, well, Hong Kong and Tibet are two different things. Hong Kong already had a legal system, a commercial system. The Chinese government is simply consolidating or recognizing the status quo. If that was the case, what about Macau? Macau, according to many reports, was a crime-infested island. Even criminals from China fled to Macau. Why was one country, two system given to Macau? Now, it's not a constitutional problem because Article 31 is there for one country, two system. Now, if you go by the Memorandum of Genuine Autonomy for Tibetans, we have clearly laid out, based on Article 4 of the Chinese Constitution and Article 12 of the Minority Nationality Act of 1984 and many of the provisions of the Minority Nationality Act. And there is a hint of Article 31, but generally it's Article 4 and Article 12. So it's not a constitutional problem for China. There's a process, there's a provision in place to address the issue. Now, it is also not an institutional problem, because when Chinese government wants to solve the issue, they create a separate institutional mechanism, like one country, two system for Hong Kong, one country, two system for Macau, and special economic zones as well. So they have created different institutions to address different situations. And it's also not an issue of political will, because the Chinese government is on record saying that we are willing to address the issue of Taiwan. Some say one China, two concept or two interpretation, the different models. But the Chinese government has already created a cabinet-level committee to address the issue of Taiwan. They are willing to engage, and they are engaging in and willing to address. Of course, there are different views in Taiwan. So, when it's not a constitutional challenge, institutional challenge, or lack of political will, why the issue of Tibet is not addressed even today? This raises a disturbing question. Is it because Tibetans are not Chinese? When Chinese government can address Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan, or special economic zones, all these are, from the Chinese government point of view, are Chinese. Hence they're willing to address. Meaning there is underlying trust, so to speak. But when it comes to Tibetans, even though there is constitutional provision, institutional mechanism, why they are not addressing it? I think it's the message. You are Tibetans, or you are not Chinese. That's why we are not addressing it. That's why the article Kalin Digichoyang referred to in New York Times raises a disturbing question. There are many liberal-minded Chinese scholars inside China and outside. They're discussing all aspects of the 18-Party Congress and issues inside China. But somehow, even in the internet and social network, the issue of Tibet is not much discussed, even by liberal-minded Chinese. Is there a systemic bias against Tibetans? Is there a psychological bias against Tibetans? It raises a disturbing question. In that sense, we appreciate our Chinese friends in this room and around the world who speak out about Tibet. On this basis, we say Tibet is a litmus test for China and the world. And I wrote a piece in Wall Street Journal yesterday, and we'll be distributing it. There we make the argument, if you really want to see a moderation of China, if the Chinese government really wants to practice the peaceful rise as the foreign policy and harmony as the domestic policy, they must address the issue of Tibet and bring peace in Tibet and bring harmony in Tibet. Then only we will believe that China is really rising peacefully and there is harmony inside China. This is also a test for the international community. Tibet is a test. Because we have invested in democracy and nonviolence for so many decades. For the last 50 years, every election of the parliament or the Khalon Tribunal Sikyong have been democratic. Even though we are a refugee community, we have practiced democracy, we have consolidated democracy. We can compare with any democratic country in the world as far as democracy practice and processes are concerned. Now, we have invested in, we say democracy and nonviolence are two uncompromising principles. We will not compromise. Now, if the international community does not support us, we will continue to march on with democracy and nonviolence, but it will reflect their stand and their principle. On the one hand, we all agree democracy, universality, freedom has to be applauded and supported. Everybody says that. Nonviolence has to be supported. On the other hand, when there is someone like Tibetans who actually practice it, if the international community don't support us, it's a statement of their stand as to what they say and what they actually do. Now we see violence around the world. International community rush to put out the fire. They send tanks, they send helicopters. But then it's too little too late. Had they supported nonviolence and democracy to begin with, the potential for future violence around the world will be diluted and lessened. In that sense, Tibet is a test for the whole world. If the international community does not support Tibet, it will be a statement that democracy and nonviolence are not worth supporting. Then there are other marginalized groups, refugee groups and ethnic groups around the world who are watching and will say, you know what, we should not invest in democracy and nonviolence because look at Tibetans. They've been practicing this for 5 decades and they're not getting the support. Why should we? And there will be ethnic conflicts around the world and violence around the world. In that sense, Tibet is a test both for China and the rest of the world. With that, I want to conclude by saying 2013 will be very important because internationally, if you look at the political scenario, US election or the presidential election just concluded. That dominated the news in 2012. 18-party Congress of China also dominated the news. It has just concluded. European financial crisis dominated the news mainly in Europe. Now it's also getting less and less. Syria dominated the international news for some time. It might be they have to find some solution, hopefully. In that sense, now at international level, I think we have to make efforts. With all these major issues being addressed one way or the other, we have to make efforts to make Tibet one of the major issues in the international forum. So in that sense, 2013 is a rare opportunity for Tibetans and our friends. And we can make this a historic year by mobilizing and galvanizing all our friends around the world through rallies. Not simply a rally of 100 and 200 people, but major rallies. By lobbying the parliaments, not just lobbying few of them, but intensifying lobbying. Not just once a year, but 2-3 times a year. Thereby we can have debates generated in different parliaments. A possible resolution passed by different parliaments. So that the message to China, to Tibet inside Tibet, is that yes, leadership in Dharamsala has changed, but friends of Tibet are with Tibetans. Yes, Tibetans in Tibet are sacrificing their lives, but their lives will not go in vain, because in 2013, we'll intensify our efforts and make realize the aspirations of Tibetan people, that His Holiness the Dalai Lama return to Tibet and Tibetan people regain their freedom. This, I believe, will happen, mainly because the spirit of the Tibetan people has never been stronger, has never been as strong as we have today. The solidarity of Tibetans inside and outside has never been this strong in recent history. This as our foundation, Tibetan spirit and Tibetan solidarity, and the unity Tibetans are showing. This, I think, is the moment when Tibetans and friends around the world should build on the momentum and make realize the aspirations of Tibetan people and make Tibet the one of the best and the most beautiful stories of the 21st century. I do believe this will happen, and with your help, with your support, we all will make it happen. When that day comes, we will make another history, and that history will be because of your support and the sacrifices of Tibetans inside Tibet. Thank you.